Picture this, a driver who had just finished fourth in the NASCAR championship standings, a driver with a multi-year contract already signed for the following season, a driver who was healthy, winning races, and by every measure still at the absolute peak of his career. And then, one day in January 2017, he called his team owner into an office and said, "I'm done. No scandal, no injury, no drama." He just left. And what came next is the part that almost nobody knows. Because Carl Edwards didn't disappear into sadness. He didn't sit in some mansion waiting for his phone to ring. He built a completely different life. A life with open fields instead of grandstands, with cockpits instead of cockpit seats, with his family front and center and no media in sight. And for nearly a decade, the NASCAR world barely heard a word from him. Today, we're going inside that life, because the man who made the backflip famous turned out to be even more interesting after the cameras went away. Carl Michael Edwards Jr. was born on August 15, 1979, in Columbia, Missouri, the same town he still calls home today. He wasn't born into NASCAR money. He wasn't the son of a team owner or a sponsored prospect. He was a kid who loved cars and figured out very quickly that racing was the only thing he wanted to do with his life. He enrolled at the University of Missouri, started studying engineering, and lasted 3 semesters before making the call. College wasn't the plan anymore. Racing was. So he did what most aspiring drivers do. He showed up everywhere, chased every opportunity, and took every odd job that kept the lights on while he waited for his shot. He worked as a substitute teacher during the week and raced on weekends. And he did something else, something that tells you exactly who Carl Edwards is as a person. He printed business cards, not for a company or a brand, for himself, his name, his contact details, and he handed them to every team owner, every crew chief, every garage gatekeeper he could find, because he knew one thing with total certainty: he was good enough. He just needed someone to believe it. That someone turned out to be Jack Roche. In 2002, Edwards ran 7 Truck Series events for a small team. His best finish was 8th. It was enough. Roche put him in a full-time Truck Series ride for 2003, and Edwards won races immediately. By 2005, he was running Cup full-time, and on the same weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway, he won both the Busch Series race and the Cup Series race. Nobody had ever done that at the same track in the same weekend. And when he won that Cup race, he climbed on top of the car, bounced twice, and launched himself into a backflip that nobody asked for and everybody remembered. That was Carl Edwards. He hadn't even been announced as someone to watch yet. Here's what a lot of people miss about Carl Edwards. He didn't just become successful, he became genuinely marketable in a way that very few NASCAR drivers ever managed. And that's where the real money came from. The foundation was Roche Fenway Racing, where he spent a decade as the face of the No. 99 Ford. But it was what happened off the track that transformed him financially. Companies looked at Carl Edwards and saw something rare: a driver with genuine charisma, a clean image, a signature celebration everyone recognized, and an authenticity that didn't feel manufactured. Aflac made him the face of an entire campaign. Office Depot signed on. Subway, Ford built a full commercial series around him called Overactive Adrenaline Disorder, where the premise was simple: Carl Edwards couldn't stop doing backflips everywhere he went. Those spots ran for years. According to SpotTrack, Edwards earned around $16 million in combined sponsorship money from just Office Depot and Aflac alone. By the time he moved to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2015, his base salary was reported at $11 million per year. Forbes placed him 6th on the list of NASCAR's highest-paid drivers in 2017, the year he retired. And according to Celebrity Net Worth, his estimated net worth today sits at around $70 million. But here's the detail that actually matters. He didn't spend it trying to look like a champion. He went back to Missouri and bought land. While most retired athletes of Carl Edwards' caliber gravitate toward the city toward endorsement appearances, TV studios, or golf courses in Scottsdale, Carl went the other direction. He went home. He has described himself in interviews as, at first glance, a simple family man who lives on a farm in Columbia, Missouri. and that's exactly what he became. He assembled significant farmland holdings in central Missouri, and after retiring, he started working that land himself. He planted crops, soybeans, corn, not as a hobby, not as a brand exercise, as an actual working operation that he was personally involved in building. Think about that contrast for a second. On a Sunday in 2016, Carl Edwards was racing at 200 miles an hour with 40,000 people watching. On a Tuesday in 2018, he was walking rows of crops in central Missouri with nobody watching at all. And according to everything he shared publicly, he preferred it that way. He has said in interviews that there are certain things in life where, if you don't show up, nobody else is going to do it for you. And his farm, his family, his home, those were the things that needed him. He also sought permission from local authorities to build a private airstrip on his property, designed to accommodate his personal aircraft. Because while Carl Edwards left the racetrack, he didn't stop moving. He just changed what he was flying toward. On January 3rd, 2009, Carl Edwards married Dr. Catherine Downey, a physician specializing in physical medicine and rehabilitation. Kate, as she's known, built her own career entirely separately from NASCAR, working with patients dealing with serious trauma and brain injuries. They have 2 children together, a daughter named Annie, born in 2010, and a son named Michael, born in 2011. And here's the part people don't expect from a man who spent 12 years driving at the very top of American motorsport. When Carl Edwards retired, he struggled. He said so himself, openly, in his own words. I felt so insecure, he told a reporter, like extremely insecure for years. That process, now I see, was really necessary for me. But it was very painful at times. I really didn't know what to do. That's not the backflip guy. That's a real person who tied his entire identity to something racing and then had to figure out who he was without it. What kept him grounded wasn't fame or fortune. It was the family that was waiting for him when he finally chose to show up. He put it simply, my family, nobody else is going to take my role there. That was the priority. That was the answer. But if you're picturing Carl Edwards sitting quietly on a porch somewhere, you've got the wrong image entirely. Because what happened when the racing stopped was not retirement in the traditional sense. He replaced competition with something else. And the something else turned out to be adventure. Carl Edwards has been a pilot since high school. That passion never left. After retiring from NASCAR, he threw himself into aviation fully, not as a passenger, not as a weekend hobby, but as a committed, skilled pilot with his own aircraft. And in October 2024, that skill became something genuinely meaningful. The day after serving as the pace car driver at Kansas Speedway, his first public reappearance at a NASCAR event in years, Carl Edwards flew straight into the recovery operation for Hurricane Helene in western North Carolina. He joined Operation Airdrop, a volunteer group of pilots using their own planes to deliver essential supplies to isolated communities that had been cut off from the outside world. He appeared on morning news to talk about it, and he was careful to redirect attention away from himself and toward the rescue volunteers who had been there since the beginning. That was Carl Edwards. The spotlight was available. He pointed it at someone else. He's also taken up jiu-jitsu in retirement, a sport that requires discipline, patience, and the kind of sustained physical commitment that clearly suits someone who never lost the competitive instinct. He documented a boating voyage from the East Coast to Italy. He's remained visibly fit, active, and engaged with life in a way that some retired athletes spend years trying to find. He didn't replace racing with comfort. He replaced it with motion. But here's the thing about Carl Edwards. Just when the NASCAR world had nearly accepted that he was gone for good, everything changed again. For the better part of 8 years, Carl Edwards existed on the edge of NASCAR's consciousness. A name people remembered, a face people missed, but a presence that had simply stepped back from the sport entirely. He gave almost no media interviews. He made fewer public appearances at races than could be counted on one hand. Then, slowly, almost quietly, he started coming back. In May 2023, he was at Darlington when NASCAR announced its 75 greatest drivers list. His name was on it. In September 2024, he was behind the wheel of the pace car at Kansas Speedway. The same weekend, he then flew straight to North Carolina for the hurricane relief effort. In April of 2025, he was the honorary starter at Darlington. And then came the announcement that genuinely surprised the NASCAR world. Starting with the Coca-Cola 600 on May 25, 2025, Carl Edwards joined Amazon Prime Video as a studio analyst for 5 NASCAR Cup Series races, working alongside host Danielle Trotter and fellow driver analyst Corey LaJoie. Nearly a decade after walking away, he was back on a national broadcast, talking about the sport that defined his life. And when someone asked him how it felt, he said, "I've been shocked at the way the sport has welcomed me back. I really know what it's like to be part of the NASCAR family. Not boastful, not dramatic, just genuinely grateful." Then, in February 2025, it became official. Carl Edwards was inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame as part of the class of 2025. The kid from Columbia who handed out business cards and didn't think he'd ever be remembered this way was standing in the Hall of Fame. He didn't sprint back to the spotlight when it was offered. He walked back calmly, on his own schedule, when the moment felt right. There's something almost more impressive about that than the backflip ever was. But to fully understand why Carl Edwards built the life he built, you have to go back to one night. November 20th, 2016, Homestead Miami Speedway. The NASCAR Championship race. Carl Edwards went into that race needing to win to claim the title. He'd done everything right. He'd had his best season in years. He was within reach of the one thing his entire career had been chasing. And then, with roughly 5 laps to go, a late caution bunched the field back up. Edwards has since said publicly in an interview with Dale Earnhardt Jr. that he believed that caution was thrown by NASCAR race control for entertainment purposes rather than for a genuine safety reason. What happened next was a crash on the restart that ended his championship. Joey Logano was involved, the title went elsewhere, and something inside Carl Edwards shifted in a way that didn't shift back. He told Dale Earnhardt Jr. Later, there was something about that caution. It was like the final thing to say, "Damn it. You're not supposed to win this thing. This is not supposed to happen." According to Edwards, the moment crystallized something that had been building for some time. Concerns about head injuries, questions about whether one more year of sacrifice, his time, his presence at home, possibly his long-term health, was worth putting on one final restart that someone else might control. He went to Joe Gibbs's office and said they needed to talk. He expected a fight. Gibbs was understanding, and Carl Edwards walked out of that office and never drove a NASCAR Cup car again. "I walked away feeling like I was leaping off of something with no net," he said. "But it was the most important turning point in my life." He has no interest in coming back behind the wheel. He said that clearly. The competitive side of him respects the sport too much to do it halfway, and the risk of injury remains real, but he holds no bitterness. "I feel completely blessed," he told Racer magazine. "No regrets. Of course, I'd like some more trophies, but I wouldn't change anything." Carl Edwards never won a Cup Series championship. That's a fact that will follow his name in record books forever, the way close calls tend to. But if you ask the people around him, the team members, the journalists, the fellow drivers, the conversation doesn't stay on what he didn't win for very long. Because there's something else there, something harder to measure. He walked away from a sport that wasn't finished with him. He walked away from money that was still being offered, from fame that was still available, from a career that had years left in it. And he went home. He planted crops. He flew planes. He raised his daughter and his son. He built a marriage that never needed a camera pointed at it to matter. And then, when he was ready, not when the sport wanted him back, not when a contract was dangled, he came back to NASCAR on his own terms, as himself, unhurried and unchanged. The Hall of Fame waited for him. The broadcast desk was there when he arrived. The backflip made Carl Edwards famous. But walking away, really walking away, with intention and peace and no safety net, that's what made him unforgettable. Some people spend their whole lives chasing the trophy, and some people figure out, at exactly the right moment, that they've already won.